I'm Hypnos, and like every quiet night, I have a story to share. You may subscribe for the night ahead. Close your eyes and let the story begin. The year was 1910, and the world was unsettled. Empires were shifting, borders were fragile, and the Balkans carried the tension of change. In the small city of Skopje, a baby's cry echoed inside a stone house on a summer day. That child was named Agnes Goncha Boyake. Few could have guessed that her life would one day echo across continent, touching the poorest and the forgotten with hands of service. Her family was Albanian, devotedly Catholic, and deeply woven into the community. Her father, Nicola, was a businessman and a respected leader, often involved in local politics. Her mother, Drana, was known for her generosity, opening the family home to the hungry and the poor. From her earliest days, Agnes grew in a household where faith was not just prayer, but action, where kindness was measured in bread given to strangers and time given to those in need. But her childhood was not untouched by hardship. When she was only 8 years old, her father died suddenly, leaving her mother to raise the children alone. The loss cut deeply. The lively warmth of her father's presence vanished, and Agnes watched her mother shoulder the weight of grief with quiet strength. That strength, wrapped in compassion, would shape the girl's heart forever. Even as a child, Agnes was drawn to the church. She listened intensely to the hymns, to the words of priest, to the mystery of devotion. While other children played, she often sat in prayer, whispering words not just for herself, but for those she saw in need on Skopje's street. Her faith was not shallow imitation. It was a flame that seemed to burn brighter each year. The city around her was alive with sounds. Merchants in the bazaar, clattering cart, the river rushing past. Yet Agnes carried a different kind of rhythm within her. The rhythm of listening, of noticing, suffering, of longing to service, or to serve. She did not yet know where her path would lead, but already the seeds of her mission were rooted. In a world shadowed by poverty and change, the small girl from Skopje had begun her journey toward becoming Mother Teresa, a woman who would one day be called the Saint of the Gutters. By her teenage years, Agnes had grown into a thoughtful young woman, her eyes carrying both warmth and quiet determination. Skopje was her home, but her mind often wandered beyond its cobbled street. She listened to the stories of missionaries who traveled across distant lands, men and women who left their homes to teach, to heal, to serve the poor. These tales stirred something powerful within her. While her friends dreamed of families, local futures, Agnes felt restless. She sensed a different calling. It was not a desire for adventure alone, though she was curious about the wider world. It was something deeper, a whisper that told her life was not meant to be lived only for oneself. She felt drawn to give herself fully, completely to God and to the service of others. Her mother, though proud of her daughter's devotion for it, losing her husband had already made life fragile. To watch her youngest child consider a path so uncertain filled her with fear. Yet Joanna also understood that the fire burning in Agnes' heart could not be dimmed. One evening, as they sat together in the quiet of their modest home, Joanna placed her hand on Agnes and said softly, "If you choose this road, go with courage, and remember, whatever you do for the poor, you do for God." That blessing stayed with her. At 18, Agnes made the decision that would define her life. She would leave her home in Skopje to join the Sisters of Lorito, a Catholic order of nuns known for their work in India. It was a bold step, leaving behind her family, her country, her language. She knew she might never return, but the call inside her was louder than fear. In 1928, with only a small bag and immense faith, she boarded a train that carried her across Europe. From there, she sailed to Ireland, where she began her training with the sisters. The cold air of Dublin, the unfamiliar English tongue, the strict life of the convent, all of it was strange. Yet Agnes adapted quickly, her determination firm. She took the name Sister Teresa after Saint Therese of Lisieux, the little flower, who believed in serving God through small acts of love. Soon after, she was sent further across the seas to India. The journey was long and exhausting, but when she arrived in Calcutta in 1929, she felt a strange sense of belonging. The air was heavy with heat and dust, the streets alive with color, noise and chaos. Rickshaws rattled past, vendors shouted, children darted barefoot between crowds. Poverty was everywhere, families living on pavement, beggars reaching out with thin hands. For many, it was overwhelming. For Teresa, it was a call made visible. She began her life in India as a teacher at a convent school. In Darjeeling, nestled in the cold hills with tea gardens stretching like waves of green, her students were girls from well-off families, and the school was disciplined, orderly, far removed from the suffering in the streets below. Teresa was a dedicated teacher, gentle yet firm, guiding her students with patience. She loved the classroom, but her heart often returned to the faces she saw outside the convent walls, the poor, the hungry, the forgotten. Years passed. In 1937, she took her final vows and became Mother Teresa. It was a new name, new identity, and a deeper commitment. She promised her life to God, her service to others. Yet she still did not know the full shape her mission would take. Then came the turning point. In 1946, during a train ride from Calcutta to Darjeeling, she experienced what she later called a call within a call. As the train moved through crowded towns and rural fields, she felt an overwhelming clarity. She heard deep within the voice of God, urging her to leave the convent school and serve the poorest of the poor directly, to live among them to share their suffering. It wasn't an easy decision to leave the convent, man stepping into uncertainty, without money, without the protection of the order. It meant trading the safety of classrooms for the chaos of slums. But Teresa knew the call was real. She could not turn away. The following year, with special permission from her superiors, she walked out of the school gate wearing a simple white sari with a blue border, the dress that would become a lifelong symbol. She carried no wealth, no position, only faith, and with that, she stepped into the street of Calcutta, where her true mission would begin. The convent gate closed behind her, and the noise of Calcutta rushed in. It was 1948. Mother Teresa stood alone, no longer dressed in the habit of her order, but in a plain white sari, thin blue border. The garment was the clothing of ordinary Indian women, humble and unadorned. She had chosen it to show that she belonged not to a convent, not to the comfortable, but to the poor she wished to serve. The streets before her were alive with chaos. Calcutta was a city of contrast. Grand colonial buildings beside crumbling huts, the wealth of merchants beside the hunger of thousands. The air smelled of spice and smoke, the cries of vendors mixed with the clatter of rickshaws, and through it all moved crowds of people, many weary, many desperate. Mother Teresa walked among them with no money in her pocket, no house to return to. She had left behind security to live among those who had nothing. Each step was uncertain, yet within her burned a certainty stronger than fear. She had been called to serve, and she would not turn away. At first, she had no institution, no helpers. Her classroom became the street. She gathered children who roamed barefoot, their bellies empty, and taught them with chalk on the side of a wall. She used sticks in the dirt to show them letters and numbers. Books were rare, paper scarce still, but her patience was endless. The children, who had known only neglect, began to smile as they learned. Her work did not stop with teaching. When she saw the sick abandoned by the roadside, she knelt beside them. She washed wounds with her own hands, bandaged sores with scraps of cloth, and gave water to lips cracked with thirst. Many were near death, but she believed no one should die alone, without dignity. Her presence itself was medicine, her touch a reminder that even the forgotten were loved. Not everyone understood. Some thought her work strange, even dangerous. Disease was feared, poverty ignored. But slowly, word spread of the small woman in a white sari who walked the street with kindness stronger than fear. Hunger was everywhere. Families starved. Children cried from emptiness. Mothers begged for crumbs. Teresa begged as well, not for herself, but for rice, for bread, for medicine to give to others. When people saw her pleading not for gain, but for the dying, their hearts softened. Small donations came, then larger ones. Slowly, she gathered enough to rent a room, then a house where she could bring in the sick and the poor. By 1950, her mission had grown enough to be recognized as a new order, the Missionaries of Charity. It began with just a handful of sisters who joined her. Women inspired by her courage, her simplicity, her unwavering service. They dressed as she did, in white saris with blue borders, and walked into the slums without fear. Their vow was simple: to serve the poorest of the poor. The house they lived in was plain, the bed simple mats, the food minimal. Yet each day they walked into the street with devotion, tending to wounds, teaching children, feeding the hungry, cradling the dying. For them, holiness was not in grand cathedrals, but in the gutters where human suffering cried loudest. Mother Teresa herself carried no airs of authority. She rose early, prayed, and then worked tirelessly, sweeping floors, carrying the sick, cooking meals, comforting children. She asked nothing of her sisters that she would not do herself. Her strength came not from wealth or power, but from an unshakable belief that in serving the poor, she was serving Christ himself. Still, the need was overwhelming. For every life touched, 100 more waited in pain. But Teresa did not measure success in numbers. She once said, "Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love." Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And that was her path. Small acts, repeated endlessly, carried out with compassion so deep it became unbreakable. By the end of that first decade, the missionaries of charity had become a beacon in Calcutta. Their doors were open to anyone: Hindus, Muslims, Christians, the abandoned, the dying, the forgotten. To Mother Teresa, faith was not a barrier. Service was universal. The journey that had begun with a single woman walking into the street had become something larger, something unstoppable. And yet for her, it was still simple. One child taught, one wound washed, one life given dignity at a time. The year was 1950, and Calcutta still bore the scars of famine, partition, and poverty. Street overflowed with need, and the cries of the poor echoed against crumbling walls. In the midst of that suffering, one small woman in a white sari with a blue border was creating something entirely new. On the 7th of October, with official approval from the Vatican, Mother Teresa founded the Missionaries of Charity. What had begun with her walking alone into the slums now had a name, a structure, and a vow. The sisters of this new order dedicated themselves to serving the poorest of the poor, to seeing Christ in every suffering face, and to offering dignity where the world had forgotten it. The early days were humble, almost bare. Their first convent was a small building with hardly enough space for the growing number of sisters who joined her. The furniture was sparse, meals simple, and comfort non-existent. But within those walls burned a fire stronger than any lack, devotion. Each sister had left behind security, family, and comfort to wear the white sari and follow Mother Teresa into the street. They walked barefoot through alleys, carrying food to the hungry. They picked up the sick abandoned at the train stations, carrying them back on makeshift stretchers. They bathed wounds, cleaned sores, and sat at the bedsides of the dying, whispering prayers and holding hands so that no one had to face death alone. Mother Teresa set the tone. She was often the first to wake, the last to sleep, moving through the street with energy that seemed endless. Though her body was small and frail, her presence was strong, her will unshakable. She washed the feet of lepers, cradled starving children, and spoke softly to those society feared to touch. To her, there was no difference between rich and poor, clean and unclean, Hindu, Muslim, or Christian. Every soul was sacred. The missionaries of charity grew quickly. Within a few years, more young women joined, drawn by the clarity of her mission. The sight of sisters in simple saris moving through the slums became a symbol of hope in Calcutta. Residents who once turned away from the dying now brought them to the sisters' doors, knowing they would be cared for with dignity. In 1952, Mother Teresa opened the Nirmal Hriday, or Home of the Pure Heart, in Calcutta. It was a hospice for the dying, created in a building once used as a temple, rest house. Here, the poorest of the poor could come to spend their last days surrounded by love, instead of abandoned on the street. Some healed and left, many died, but all left with dignity, their final breaths eased with the care of the sisters. The work was not without critics. Some accused her of glorifying suffering, others proselytizing, but her response was always the same. We are not here to convert, we are here to love, and her work spoke louder than any argument. As the years passed, her mission extended beyond Calcutta. Homes for orphans, lepers, and the homeless opened across India. The sisters spread out, carrying the same vows, the same saris, the same fire. What began with one woman now rippled outward, carried by hundreds who shared her devotion. Still, Mother Teresa remained unchanged in her simplicity. She lived in a small room with a narrow bed, a wooden table, and a crucifix. She owned almost nothing, kept no luxuries, and ate the same simple meals as her sisters. Her strength came not from possessions, but from prayer. Each day, before walking into the chaos of the street, she knelt in silence, drawing energy from the God she served. By the late 1950s, the missionaries of charity had become a recognized force of compassion in India. And yet, for Mother Teresa, it was not about recognition. It was always about the next hungry child, the next sick body, the next soul who needed to know they were loved. The foundation had been laid. What began with a simple step into the street of Calcutta had grown into a movement of love that would soon stretch across the world. The street of Calcutta had become her home. The alleys, her classrooms, the poor, her constant companions. But Mother Teresa's mission, though rooted in one city, could not be contained there. By the 1960s, the flame of compassion she had lit was spreading across India and beyond. The missionaries of charity began to open homes in other cities, Delhi, Bombay, and eventually across the seas. The same white saris, the same vows, the same tireless service carried into new lands. Sisters arrived in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe. Wherever poverty cried out, loudest they went. Their work was quiet, not announced with banners or speeches, but the impact was unmistakable. Mother Teresa herself remained simple, traveling with little more than a small bag, rosary beads, and her sari. Yet, as her sisters expanded their reach, the world began to notice the woman at the heart of the mission. Journalists wrote of her work. Photographers captured the sight of her cradling sick children, of her walking through slums with steady purpose. What was once hidden in the shadows of Calcutta was now visible to the world. In 1965, Pope Paul granted official recognition to the Missionaries of Charity as a religious congregation under the Vatican. That same year, he invited Mother Teresa to open a home in Rome. It was a turning point. From then on, her order was not only an Indian mission, but a global one. Traveling was never easy for her. She disliked attention. She avoided luxuries, and she preferred the company of the poor to the comfort of hotels. But she accepted the journeys because they brought resources, volunteers, and recognition to her sister's work. Each trip was another way to gather help for the poorest of the poor. Her presence in the West was striking. In cities filled with wealth, her sari and sandals seemed out of place, yet her words carried power. She did not flatter or soften. She told the wealthy and powerful, there is hunger not only for bread, but for love. There are poor not only in slums, but in your own homes. Find them, love them. Her voice was small, her accent heavy, but her conviction undeniable. Crowds listened, leaders bowed their heads, and ordinary people were moved to action. The Missionaries of Charity grew rapidly. By the 1970s, they had hundreds of sisters and dozens of centers across the continent. They opened orphanages, hospices, and homes for lepers. In each place, the approach was the same: serve the poorest without question, without judgment, without fear. And yet, with recognition came criticism. Some questioned the medical standards of her homes. Others challenged her views on contraception and abortion, accusing her of being too rigid. But she did not seek to please critics. She returned again and again to the same principle. We are called not to be successful, but to be faithful. Her mission was not to solve poverty in numbers, but to give dignity in moment. She reminded people that each life mattered. To her, lifting one dying man from a gutter was as important as changing the lives of thousands. For every critic, there were countless who had been touched by her sister's care. The orphans who found mothers in the convent, the dying who found comfort in their final days, the lepers who were no longer shunned but embraced. The world began to honor her. In 1979, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. When asked how she would celebrate, she replied, by feeding 400 children. Instead of the usual grand banquet, the funds were given to the poor. In Oslo, she told the audience, peace begins with a smile. The sight of her, tiny, stooped, wrapped in her white sari, receiving one of the world's highest honors, was a symbol of simplicity, triumphing over grandeur. The award brought even more attention, more volunteers, and more resources to the missionaries of charity. But for Mother Teresa, the recognition never changed her way of life. She still slept in a small room with a simple bed. She still walked the street of Calcutta. She still held the hands of the dying. The world called her a saint. She continued to call herself a servant. From Skopje to Calcutta, from the slums to the hulls of world leaders, her mission had become global, and yet she remained rooted in the same vow she had taken decades earlier: to serve the poorest of the poor, one person at a time. By the late 1970s and 1980s, Mother Teresa was no longer only a figure in the slums of Calcutta. She had become a global icon. Photographs of her weathered face and blue-bordered sari appeared on magazine covers. Her name was spoken in Parliament, her work honored by nations. She was awarded the Nobel Prize or the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979, the world's most visible recognition of her lifelong service. In Oslo, she stood before kings, diplomats, and dignitaries. The hall was grand, filled with polished wood and golden light. She, in her simple sandals and worn sari, seemed out of place. Yet when she began to speak, her voice, soft, accented, almost fragile, cut through the air. She did not talk of politics or strategy. She spoke of love. If you want to change the world, she said, go home and love your family. Her words disarmed the powerful. For decades, she had lifted dying men from gutters and wiped wounds others would not touch. Now she was telling the richest and strongest on earth that the path to peace began not in treaties, but in compassion. The Nobel Prize gave her work global visibility. Donations increased, volunteers poured in from across the continent, and the missionaries of charity spread even further. By the end of the 1980s, they had thousands of sisters working in more than 40 countries. Homes for the sick, orphanages, and schools carried her mission into places she had never seen as a child in Skopje. But with fame came sharp criticism. Writers, journalists, and activists began to question her methods. Some accused her of accepting money from controversial figures. Others claimed her homes lacked proper medical care. Critics pointed to her strict Catholic values, her opposition to contraception and abortion, and argued that her influence on policy harmed the very poor she sought to help. Mother Teresa rarely responded directly. When pressed, she simply repeated her guiding principle: we are not social workers. We are religious. We serve Jesus in the poor. For her, the mission was spiritual as much as physical. She was not trying to reform systems, but to give dignity to individuals in their final moment, to love them as they were. This did not satisfy everyone. Some saw her as a saint, others as a symbol of old traditions. Yet she remained unmoved. Recognition did not inflate her. Criticism did not break her. Her focus was steady, to serve day by day, person by person. Even as the world debated her, she walked the same street of Calcutta, bent over the same sick beds, prayed the same prayers at dawn. Her sandals were thin, her sari faded, but her resolve remained bright. Those who met her in person often described something striking. She was small, barely 5 feet tall, and frail with age, yet her presence filled a room, her eyes, deep and piercing, carried a strength that seemed beyond her size. She listened intently, laughed easily, and spoke with bland honesty. She was not polished or grand, but utterly direct. In her later years, she began to suffer health problems, heart issues, weakness, exhaustion. The weight of decades of service pressed on her body. Yet even when doctors urged her to rest, she continued to work. For her, stopping was never an option. She often said, "I can do things you cannot. You can do things I cannot. Together, we can do great things." Her life stood at the center of paradox, loved and attacked, praised as a saint, accused as a symbol, surrounded by fame, yet living in poverty. What united all sides was one truth: she could not be ignored. By the early 1990s, her face had become one of the most recognizable in the world. She had dined with presidents, spoken to the United Nations, and stood beside popes. Yet at the end of each journey, she returned to Calcutta, to the slums, the sick, and the poor. That was her true stage, her true calling. The 1990s brought a new chapter for Mother Teresa. The woman who had once walked alone into the street of Calcutta was now in her 80s. Her body frail, her steps slower, yet the fire within her had not dimmed. The world watched as age and illness pressed against her, but still she carried her mission forward day after day. Her health struggles became more frequent. In 1983, while visiting Rome, she suffered a heart attack. A second followed in 1989, leaving her weak and in need of a pacemaker. Doctors urged her to retire, to rest after decades of unrelenting service. But Mother Teresa could not imagine leaving the poor. Even in weakness, she insisted on returning to the street, to the homes, to the sick who waited for her touch. She leaned more heavily on her sisters. By then, the missionaries of charity had grown into thousands of members, spread across more than 100 countries. Orphanages, leprosy clinics, homes for the dying, and schools carried the same blue-bordered sari into the corners of the world. Her sisters became her arms and legs when her own could no longer keep pace. In 1991, during a visit to Mexico, she again fell ill in pneumonia. Or with pneumonia, the years of strain on her body were visible. Yet whenever she recovered, even slightly, she returned to work. For her, service was not a choice but a vow. Her days were bound to it until her last breath. Despite her declining health, the 1990s also brought more recognition. In 1996, the United States awarded her the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors. Yet even as leaders praised her, she brushed off the ceremonies, focusing instead on the lives waiting in her homes. Awards she believed belonged not to her but to the poor she served. Those close to her spoke of the contrast between her small, fragile frame and her unyielding will. She would sit in meetings with heads of state, her voice barely rising above a whisper. Yet those whispers carried weight. She had no armies, no wealth, no political office. Still, her presence moved nations. As her strength declined, she began preparing her order for the future. She reminded sisters that their mission was not tied to her alone. It was rooted in love, in service, in faith. Whatever she was present or gone, the missionaries of charity could continue as long as the poor remained. In March of 1997, after nearly 5 decades of tireless service in Calcutta, she stepped down as head of the Missionaries of Charity. The sisters elected Sister Nirmala as her successor, ensuring the order's continuity. Mother Teresa, though relieved of leadership, remained a guiding presence, visiting homes, blessing children, and praying with her sisters. That same year, her health grew critical. On September 5, 1997, in the city where her mission had begun, Mother Teresa passed away at the age of 87. Calcutta mourned her as one of its own. Thousands lined the street as her body, carried in a simple coffin, made its final journey through the city she had served. Her funeral drew world leaders, royals, and the poor alike. In the crowd stood President and beggars, side by side, united in grief for the woman who had touched them both. Her life had bridged worlds, from the guttas of Calcutta to the halls of power, always with the same message: love in action. The missionaries of charity continued, their saris bright against the dust of the street, their work a living memory of their founder. For them, her death was not an ending, but a passing of the torch. The vow she had taken was now theirs to carry forward. Mother Teresa's final years were marked by weakness of body, but never of spirit. Even in frailty, she showed the same courage she had carried since the day she walked out of the convent with nothing but faith. Her mission did not end with her. It lived on in every sister who bent over a sick bed, every child lifted from hunger, every dying person held in dignity. The 1990s brought a new chapter for Mother Teresa. The woman who had once walked alone into the street of Calcutta was now in her 80s. Her body frail, her steps slower, yet the fire within her had not dimmed. The world watched as age and illness pressed against her, but still she carried her mission forward day after day. Her health struggles became more frequent. In 1983, while visiting Rome, she suffered a heart attack. A second followed in 1989, leaving her weak and in need of a pacemaker. Doctors urged her to retire, to rest after decades of unrelenting service. But Mother Teresa could not imagine leaving the poor. Even in weakness, she insisted on returning to the street, to the homes, to the sick who waited for her touch. She leaned more heavily on her sisters. By then, the missionaries of charity had grown into thousands of members, spread across more than 100 countries. Orphanages, leprosy clinics, homes for the dying, and schools carried the same blue-bordered sari into the corners of the world. Her sisters became her arms and legs when her own could no longer keep pace. In 1991, during a visit to Mexico, she again fell ill in pneumonia. Or with pneumonia, the years of strain on her body were visible. Yet whenever she recovered, even slightly, she returned to work. For her, service was not a choice but a vow. Her days were bound to it until her last breath. Despite her declining health, the 1990s also brought more recognition. In 1996, the United States awarded her the Congressional Gold Medal, one of the highest civilian honors. Yet even as leaders praised her, she brushed off the ceremonies, focusing instead on the lives waiting in her homes. Awards, she believed, belonged not to her but to the poor she served. Those close to her spoke of the contrast between her small, fragile frame and her unyielding will. She would sit in meetings with heads of state, her voice barely rising above a whisper. Yet those whispers carried weight. She had no armies, no wealth, no political office. Still, her presence moved nations. As her strength declined, she began preparing her order for the future. She reminded sisters that their mission was not tied to her alone. It was rooted in love, in service, in faith. Whatever she was present or gone, the missionaries of charity could continue as long as the poor remained. In March of 1997, after nearly 5 decades of tireless service in Calcutta, she stepped down as head of the missionaries of charity. The sisters elected Sister Nirmala as her successor, ensuring the order's continuity. Mother Teresa, though relieved of leadership, remained a guiding presence, visiting homes, blessing children, and praying with her sisters. That same year, her health grew critical. On September 5, 1997, in the city where her mission had begun, Mother Teresa passed away at the age of 87. Calcutta mourned her as one of its own. Thousands lined the street as her body, carried in a simple coffin, made its final journey through the city she had served. Her funeral drew world leaders, royals, and the poor alike. In the crowd stood President and beggars, side by side, united in grief for the woman who had touched them both. Her life had bridged worlds, from the gutters of Calcutta to the halls of power, always with the same message: love in action. The missionaries of charity continued, their saris bright against the dust of the street, their work a living memory of their founder. For them, her death was not an ending, but a passing of the torch. The vow she had taken was now theirs to carry forward. Mother Teresa's final years were marked by weakness of body, but never of spirit. Even in frailty, she showed the same courage she had carried since the day she walked out of the convent with nothing but faith. Her mission did not end with her. It lived on in every sister who bent over a sick bed, every child lifted from hunger, every dying person held in dignity. The funeral of Mother Teresa in September 1997 was unlike any the city of Calcutta had ever seen. The street overflowed with mourners. The poor she had served, the children she had rescued, the sick she had comforted. Along them stood president, queens, and world leaders, rich and poor alike, followed her coffin, carried through the city she had made her home, wrapped not in grandeur but in simplicity. It was a dramatic farewell, yet one fitting for a woman who had bridged extremes: wealth and poverty, fame and humility, power and service. For decades, she had bent over the dying Gutas, and now the world bent its head in respect. But her story did not end with her passing. Her work lived on in the thousands of sisters of the missionaries of charity who continued to wear the same white saris with blue borders and walk into the same street where their founder had once stood alone. Homes for the poor, orphanages, schools and hospices remained open, carrying her mission forward in silence and devotion. Recognition deepened after her death. In 2003, just 6 years later, Pope John Paul beatified her, giving her the title Blessed Teresa of Calcutta. It was one of the fastest beatifications in modern history, a testament to the global sense that her life had embodied holiness. Crowds gathered in Rome for the ceremony, their voices rising in prayer for the woman they already called a saint in their heart. 13 years later, in 2016, Pope Francis declared her as saint of the Catholic Church, Saint Teresa of Calcutta. The girl from Skopje who had become a mother to the abandoned, a voice for the voiceless, a servant of the poorest of the poor. Her canonization was celebrated not only by Catholics, but by people of many faiths, who saw in her life the universal language of compassion. Her legacy is complex, as all great lives are. Admirers saw in her a living example of love in action, a woman who proved that holiness could be found not in grand cathedrals, but in the Gutas of Calcutta. Critics continue to question her methods and beliefs. Yet, whether praised or questioned, her impact cannot be denied. She changed the way the world looked at poverty, not as a statistic, but as a face, a name, a soul deserving dignity. She once said, "Not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things with great love." Those words became the essence of her legacy. She did not build empires or write philosophies. She simply bent down, day after day, to serve those the world had forgotten. And in those small acts of love, she created a movement that spanned the globe. Her story reminds us that greatness is not measured by wealth or titles, but by compassion, that the world's deepest wounds are not healed by speeches, but by hands willing to serve. That peace does not begin in parliament, but in smiles, in kindness, in the decision to love even when it's hard. As night falls, one can imagine her still, walking through the alleys of Calcutta, sari brushing against the dust, rosary in hand, eyes searching for the next person in need. Her body may be gone, but her mission lives on in every act of kindness done in her name. And in the quiet truth she carried, that love, in its smallest form, is the greatest force of all. This was Hypnos. Another story has been told, and now it's time to rest. Good night.